Okay, welcome to the first press conference of the day. Today we have a press conference of the filmmakers whose films are in the competition section, in the South Asia competition. So what we'll do in the next 1 hour quickly is to kind of talk about some of the general issues that all of you kind of deal with while making films and so on, so that it'll be of help to other filmmakers, future reference and so on and so forth. What I see here is like two sets of filmmakers, two kinds of filmmakers. I mean, you have Dominic, Saurav and Sarvnik. So Dominic is the director of Rapture, Saurav is the director of Guras, Sarvnik is the director of Against the Tide. All three of them are second-time filmmakers. And you have Jayant, who's the director of Sthal, and Dibakar, who's the director of Dilli, who are first-time feature filmmakers. So I see two sets of filmmakers here. So what I'll do is initially I'll ask questions to these two groups separately, and then we can actually take it from there. So the first thing, and we've had some of these conversations in the actual Q&As after the films, but we'll do it so that people can respond to each other at this point of time, not with an audience like before. So I want to ask those who made the second film this time, right, to actually talk about their journeys of making the second film, with focus on two things. One is kind of zeroing in on your first film and the second film, and was it the same process, was it a different process? And second, the kind of film ecosystem that you encountered while making the first film and the second film. Has it changed? Was it different? Were the challenges same, challenges different? Has the ecosystem itself changed? Yeah. So these are the two things I think we can start with, and then we can go to the first timers and ask a similar question about their first time filmmaking. So Sarvnik, why don't you start with that?
My first film I co-directed with my college batchmate from Jamia. The film's called A Ballad of Maladies. And at that point of time, the idea was to kind of talk about Kashmir from the historical point of view, and looking at it, how it's not in a place in a social vacuum. Everything historically over the last 400 years that has happened has led to where Kashmir is at today. We were addressing these through the music of resistance, hip-hop, blues, and tracing the history of today's music of hip-hop and blues, tracing it back to historically how they've recorded their lived memories through their folk forms. Because their lived histories are not really state-approved. And while making the film, I actually realized that I am kind of drawn to subjects of displacement because it's like my umbilical cord. I've tried to cut it off. I've tried to run away from it. It's my own family's history of displacement. Grandparents came from Pakistan. The 1984 riots happened when I was a year old. Our house was burned down. So I've grown up with the history of like passed down trauma, and wanted to distance myself from it. And it was actually during filming of Soz that I started to read up about this upcoming coastal road in Bombay, which was going to displace the Kolis from their ancestral villages. And I started to think displacement's happening everywhere. Somewhere it's called nationalism, and other places it's called development. And the narratives of trauma or individual histories that are completely wiped through because there's a collective narrative that is being formed. So what happens to that lived history is what drew me into this film. With Kashmir, I had realized that as a mainlander, I started to feel rather intrusive being there. And so I had to foreground the camera constantly, being an outsider, reminding everyone, also who's your audience? When it's Kashmir, it's highly polarized. People are really like, a line is drawn in the sand and people are on either this side or this side. So even with that film, the idea was to go under your skin and let polarity not become a concern. Let it be about what I feel. This is my subjective truth. With Against the Tide, I wanted to work on my craft more, go deeper, where I didn't want to foreground the camera this time. I really wanted that life to be lived be so immersed by the audience, it to be so engrossing that you're almost living it alongside them. Because climate change is always seen as something which is happening to someone else. It's never seen as, and humans, when we tell our stories, we foreground our narratives. Humans are at the center of the story. We forget that there are forces that are bigger than us, that are constantly shaping our lives. So I think it was my search for something that was not issue-led, something which was extremely up close and personal, which was a story of humanity, because I think the universal truth is rather abstract. And that is why it is universal. When we get into specifics and definitions, so I wanted to get the flavor of that abstract truth. And I have found so much love in the community that to define the community seemed like a misleading thing to do. To bring people in, immerse them into the culture, the way it is lived, the belief system, that is what defines the community, or the ancestral knowledge. That is what became my quest. And through the two friends, I'm actually looking at that, and how they ended up actually vocabularizing or articulating the very arguments that I was having with myself. A heart and the mind, and I found, really I got lucky that in my two characters I found the voice of the heart and the voice of the mind, and so the film shaped like a series of conversations between the heart and the mind, and the danger of letting the two stop interacting with one another.
That's fascinating. And one of the things that I've noticed in all the conversations I'm having these panels of filmmakers, that suddenly connections appear between films which one has not thought before. I'll come to it in a minute, but also in terms of process, Sarvnik, because in terms of when you made the first film, when you made the second film, what was the film ecosystem that you were engaging with, and how did you navigate it? Was it similar, different? Was it easier, more difficult? I mean, how did you navigate the kind of filmmaking and the film ecosystem that you were working with?
Very, very different. The first film was produced by PSBT, and they have a very small budget. And while making that film, it took me 4 years. And I just realized that a lot of your idea of what you want to do, the creative space that you need, requires the luxury of time. And time then ends up sadly equating with money. So and PSBT was very restrictive in the sense that I couldn't raise more money. So they were the absolute producers, and I started to feel like that is wrong. I have to produce my own film, because if I don't have the ability, if I have the will but not the ability, or I'm not given the permission to raise more funds for the film, then I'm also limiting my own creative process in a lot of ways. And for me, the ecosystem completely expanded as Let's Talk, which is an organization from Calcutta. They handpick projects like mine, and literally they mentor you. They give you an idea of what the ecosystem outside of the country is like, what options are available to us. What does it mean to pitch your idea? What does it mean to pitch your film? What does it mean to write grant applications? And I think it did take a very long time for raising the funds, but I started to feel like I was forming a closer relationship with my film as I was writing it on paper. Yes, I was defining for myself what the trajectory of the film would be like. And in that sense, a lot of spiritual connections started to form. Everything that happens in the sea is happening in the lives of my characters. The sea is dying, it's unwell, it's barren, there's no fish. What does it look like in the lives of these people? It looks like financial crisis, it looks like social crisis. There is strife between husband and wife, and that's where I wanted to place my camera. And if I wasn't writing those grant applications, I wouldn't be making those connections. I'd solely depend on bringing my rushes and then extracting what knowledge I could. Here it became completely flipped almost. So the application wasn't being written to convince someone else. Actually, I was writing it for myself, and that surprised me a lot, because I think the relationship of love that I formed with my own film ended up translating into a lot of support and love from outside, which really changed things for me, gave me the space. Of course, we kicked in, started production, and I crowdfunded and did everything that needed to be done before the funds actually started to flow in. So money, I wasn't holding it as a hindrance, but just to have it helps shape and the film, the way it is looking now.
Fantastic. Both Saurav and Dominic, second film, and I'm thinking interestingly, Sarvnik also, documentarian, doing kind of very different kind of film that you guys are doing, goes back to childhood, goes back to personal memories, as kind of structuring some of the engagements, and both of you actually do that. Like both Saurav and Dominic do that. So it's very interesting how there is that kind of link that a lot of filmmakers are now kind of trying to draw with. Saurav, first you've worked with a same kind of world, different kind of characters, but something connecting the first film and the second film. There's something about you in those two films, and in the first film is directly your, like, something that you experienced, whatever. So, tell us about these two films, the way it came about, but also, like I said earlier, the film ecosystem and how did you navigate? I know that the second film has a slightly bigger star in it, unlike the first one. So you've done some different things in the second film. So both these issues, yeah.
So I think the process of making the first film like always started from a personal gaze of experimenting with your memories and going back to your roots and your cultures. We mounted it on a very small level, and we never knew like we will make it till what we are right now, this stage. So I started with that kind of engagement, and as we navigated through the creative process, it was indeed like a very healing process to begin with. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and ultimately making it to different platforms. Learned a lot along the way, but it was a tough, just mounting the first project from a so-called coming from a film school background. But it was not easy cakewalk, and I've had previous experiences with festivals like Cannes, where my short film premiered in competition. But again, it was not easy for me to mount the first film. So we had to wait a lot of years to begin with. And we ended up funding our first film entirely on our own. It was just in NFDC, we ended up meeting Sanjay Gulati, who loved the film, came on board later onwards. So I think I have to thank NFDC a lot for that, the lab, work in progress lab, which nurtured Nimto.
This is the Film Bazaar.
Yeah, Film Bazaar, which nurtured Nimto there. So I think it actually started from there. So Nimto had its own naive kind of organic process. And coming back to Guras, the current film, I think we were quite wary of a few, pitfalls and how to navigate. But having said that, of course, because of the first film, the production, budgeting, the funding became quite easier, because we have had experiences how to navigate. Again, co-production market in FDC and Hong Kong lab, it did help. I remember I met Ram Krishna Pokhrel from Nepal in co-production. We were both with different projects, but we ended up gelling well in an NFDC co-production market, and that's how some years later we somehow came together for Guras. So it's funny, we went for other projects which never happened, but again Guras came along the way. It again started from the personal gaze, an incident which happened during my vacation in Darjeeling, in my village. So that engagement, that gaze is always going. I'm always honest about where I want to reflect from. I always want to reflect from the place which appears natural, which speaks to me. So yeah, the approach was same, but in matter of talking about the mounting it, yeah. So we did go from there. I think because of the first film, it became easier for us to get kind of initial support from places like Hubert Wolf Funds, so which kind of gave confidence to more producers to come on board. So I think it's ongoing process. We learn as we go about, So yeah.
Nice. So again, just to follow up on that, your second film is slightly more in terms of its narrative scope and so on, slightly more ambitious than your first film, right? So like I said, you have actors earlier. I mean, in Nimto, you appear. Your father appears. It's a very a production which is very intimate, right? In that sense, shot in your own house, was it? Yeah. So it's like that, right? The second one has a slightly more ambitious scope. It also deals with questions of economy in the background. It has some kind of historical sense. There's a philosophical kind of take of the film. There's also in terms of production stars. So the confidence. I mean, really, there's a confidence one can see here of actually mounting it better. So how do you think of yourself as growing in that kind of thing? Where do you see this going? Do you see you kind of emerging more confident, both in terms of your narrative kind of things and in terms of your ability to mount a project, both, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think as we go about making this so-called independent films, we realize taking out to the people apart from the festival circuit is always a tough process. So I had pretty much sorted my the language of film being Nepali, I wanted to at least reach out to them, like let's say the Nepali-speaking diaspora, not only in India, but of course a larger nation like Nepal or other places. So I was very wary of this process, and hence I wanted to cast the popular actors from Nepal. So at least while we do festivals and here and there, at least in Nepal, it has a scope of getting it released. So yeah, it is kind of a very calculated step, you know, because we are able to get make these movies through supports. But what about the process of getting the producer, the due credit, or the financial aspect? So yeah, it was. I think it was a wise decision to mount these actors. Like for instance, Khagendra, the father in Guras, is a very popular director and actor himself from Nepal. So to bring him on board, and Menuka, a popular actress from Nepal, so it was a kind of a mounting it in a way that so it is being watched by more masses in Nepal and apart from the festival circuit. So it was, I think, a very well thought decisions,
I think there's a very interesting lesson here in what you're doing. Like, because on the one hand, your film, one would feel, is a very small region film, right? In the sense that it's Darjeeling, it's like very a village, whatever. But clearly, all small villages have a world, which is much bigger, right? And it's a question is to access those worlds, both in terms of narrative, but also in terms of the way we circulate and make films and so on. And I think there's something very intelligent and interesting in what you just said about how, like many film cultures in India, for example, things are very small. I mean, in that their scope. But clearly, there is an imaginative way to actually expand that geography, right? And I think that's an interesting kind of to actually, because all filmmakers want films to be shown, if possible, get released. I mean, these are all desires that everybody has, right? So there's, I think, an interesting case study thing here to actually think about. And I would think that like more conversation happen on some of these things, because it's unusual that you actually get to hear this kind of a...
Just to add to that, at least like we are getting opportunity to make our own films, but how about like, making it more accessible by putting more relatable face, ultimately the gauge is still there. We are still able to make what we want to make,
right.
It's just like it's just about mounting it in a better way,
correct.
So that it has a better scope of just not limiting it to festival.
And also you're thinking about markets in a different way. I mean, it's not just some national or regional market, but also expanding it interestingly. That's an interesting. Dominic, again, some of these things again can recur in your thing also. First of all, second film, the same kind of thing. I mean, there's a difference. There's the ecosystem that might have changed from then and now, or maybe not. You work with a very intimate crew usually, right? That's there. You also work with a very specific regional kind of thing. So, what are your thoughts about? I mean, the kind of things that Sarvnik and Saurav has been talking about.
Yeah, for me, when I was making a first film, it was more about to get it out of my soul. Like it was too heavy on me because it's a very personal film. It is also later on after making that film, I realized that I need to make a trilogy. I realized that it's a film on my memories. The memories that I had in my village, and for a child to experience all these things was heavy, and so film was it's a way of letting out and then sharing with the audience. So for Mama was something like that, and I just had to go and make it, And one night I was writing with my DP, with Tojo, the first feature, and we realized that it's going to be too big and we don't have money for that. And Tojo came to Shillong. Then I said, Tojo, I can't shoot this film. Yesterday you were talking about why we don't take Tojo. So Tojo had to go back. And then, like, I've been thinking, like, how can I make this film? And one night I just think the idea of Mama came about my father who is still living. And then I said, like, why not I make this film? And then I just wrote that in one night. Till from 1 o'clock till morning 10:30, I just wrote that, and then I call up my producer, Zhu Jiansang from China, because I met her in Beijing Film Academy with my diploma film there, and I said like, hey, we talk about producing my film. Do you still want to be on board? And then I sent her the script. I said like, yeah, So she sent money, and then we shot that. I had no idea of which festivals to go, what to do, and all this. It was purely wanting to let the film out there. And Mami in that way is very special because Mami discovered the film, and from there it went. And so in terms of strategy, in terms of production, we were like very, very nascent, and we really don't know much about it. We just made the film Mama. And yes, along the way, we kind of understood what are the things that we need to do if we go on making this film in terms of productions, meeting sales agents or distributors or festivals like that. And luckily, when I was writing my second feature, which was parallelly going to a different labs with Mama, and it was developed in AFIS in Busan for 6 months, and then went to Film Bazaar for co-production market, and we got funding for development from Hewlett Balls Fund. That kind of attracted other producers, and then we went to Cannes in La Fabrique. Then Jayant able to brought in producers like Anurangachar. Anurangachar able to brought in 2 other producers on board. Jayant able to brought in 1 more investors and producers from China. And then we got funding from Vincent Sudes and from Doha Film Institute. So both this film, Mama and Rapture, is a part of a trilogy that I'm making on the memories of my village, the memories that I experienced. So Mama was like very personal film, very small film. But then I wanted to really explore the village itself as a character, as a crowd. And you would see in my film that it's about the crowd in the beginning, and then we slowly, the coincidence, the faith, even if you are like as a character, we are passive, we don't want to react. Some events in life will choose you, will make you more the bearer of the whatever is happening more than the others. I think it's on our basis of our conscience, on our basis of how we react to life, So that's what happened slowly. That's why film from crowd to it went to individuals in the end of the film. Yeah. So
these are again interesting stories about incubation setups, festivals, discoveries. Like you were talking about yesterday about how Anu saw the film in the Mami thing and then came on board. So it's interesting kind of connections that we've made. Jayant and Dibakar, I mean, the question to you is: you made your first feature film, right? And you're here. And I was saying yesterday also that this part of the story is the happy story, right? You're here, right? There's more to talk about it, which might not be that happy and so on. But right now, this is a happy story. So tell us this happy story. Like, how did we get here? Like, so what is the story? How did you start? Jayant, why don't you start with how did you start making this film? Why this particular narrative about this girl in a Maharashtrian village, negotiating caste and gender in a particular manner? I mean, how? I mean, what is your trajectory into coming this story?
Like the constant questions that we get, and it's a questions that we always ask ourselves how to go about it. With Mama, what we did is I knew that it will be a tough film for people to watch. Maybe it's because of the way I make it. But because it's the first Garo film that has went to film festival, that has won national award, and there was this the pride in community, like Garo community were like really, really proud of it, and they felt...
The Dominic's film was the first film to win a national award in Garo language.
Yeah, so the whole Garo community were so proud of the film, and then they were like really eagerly waiting to watch the film. But at the same time, we don't have theater. What I did with lots of people messaged me, said that, hey, where can I watch the film? Where can I watch the film? And of course, like I tried to approach to OTT platform for Mama, but I didn't get it. And so one day what I did is I sent out a message in Facebook, and I said like, I want to screen a film in Garo Hills, but I really don't know how to do that. But if you guys want to come on board and want to help me, please. So then my producer, Eva Goodme, who became a producer later.
She became a producer in the second film after this, right? Yeah.
She's like complete stranger, and then she said like, I said like, hey Dominic, I run a small homestay in Tura, the headquarter of Garo Hills. Would you mind coming and staying with me, and we can figure it out this together? He's like, wow, really? So I just went there, and then she took me in. She adopted me.
That's what she said yesterday.
That's
I've
what,
adopted Dominic.
And then she went around talking to the administrator there, and then we book hall, the auditorium of this thing, district headquarter. And then there's another filmmaker called Pradeep Kurba from Shillong who came on board, who helped me with all the logistics and publicities and things like that. And it was the people's effort to screen the film, because they realized that, okay, we really want this film to be out there for the people, and then all the intellectuals of Garo Hills came together to promote this film. Like Milky Chisholm, Sempatus, all the artists came together to promote this film, and then it was like a 700-seater auditorium, and we ran it for a week, and it was like a pack.
Oh wow!
Like we had like a 3 screenings.
I thought you were going to talk about one screening.
No. So we had a 1 week screening and like 3 days, 3 shows each, and it was like packed. At the same time, there's this distributor in Northeast, Sankarlal Goenka. He saw the film in the festivals, and then he really loved the film. Who also helped distribute Rima Das film. And then we had a talk of distributing the film at least in Assam and in Shillong with the Ra Theatre, but COVID happened. So we're still planning to distribute the film. With Rapture, we have my producers in China, who is there's another producer, Sun Lee. He got a OTT platform there, so he's gonna release the film there. We're having a talk with the Japanese, one of my producer's friend, who wants to have a theater release in Japan. And also because of Vision Sudes, they have this Benelux country which will work on really distributing the film out there. Locally, Eva Gunme, who is my local producer, she wants to take the film to all the district of Garo Hills and in Meghalaya. So this is the plan that we are working on right now.
No, again, like I can see. I mean, I'm fascinated by these kind of creative models that are emerging here, right? I mean, you actually the community comes together, and actually, like I said, I'm assuming that all of you thought we are talking about one screening, right? I mean, then suddenly we're talking about a week of 3 screenings. I mean, this is it's possible then. I mean, there's something about this ecosystem that allows us. So we'll have to work outside the box. Yeah, Dominic. Yeah.
So there are like these artists and intellectuals in Garos who people look up to. So they told me, and like, hey Dominic, like if we say that it's a good film, because such films, it will be difficult for a bit. I am not underestimating the audience, of course, but they said that if we promote it like that, then people will come, because they wouldn't be able to deny that if we say this is good film, then they will be able to deny it. So we have to
build up.
So we build up the whole thing. So it's like that. Yeah.
Jayant, I mean, clearly, I mean, you had your premiere in Toronto and all that. So clearly, I mean, from making a film about your village with people there, from an experience that you yourself had, whatever, then scaling up to the Toronto Festival, now we're at MAMI. What was that route like? How did it happen? Did you plan it through? Was it like kind of all kinds of just shooting in the dark and something hitting the mark? I mean, how did it kind of work?
फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग कुछ प्लान नहीं था, ऑर्गेनिकली हो गया. बस ये था कि फिल्म बनानी है. फिल्म के बाद बेचनी कैसी है, क्या होगा, कुछ प्लान नहीं किया था. तो फिल्म बनाते हैं, बाद में देखते हैं, यह अप्रोच था. और मैं थोड़ा इस मामले में कच्चा हूँ कि मुझे बहुत ज़्यादा दुनिया समझ में नहीं आती कि क्या करे आगे वगैरह. तो फिल्म बनाए, और मेरा ऑलमोस्ट जो वर्किंग प्रोग्रेस एडिट ये था. तो मैंने हमारे एक दोस्त है, उनको फिल्म दिखाई. अपने यार दोस्तों को फिल्म अच्छी फिल्म, उसने देखी, बोले कि यार ये तो बहुत अच्छी फिल्म है. अच्छा तो तुम टिप को क्यों नहीं भेजते हो टोरंटो? बोला कि वो तो चला गया, डेडलाइन हो गया, मिस हो गया. कोई बात नहीं, तुम लिखो, उनको मेल करो कि ऐसा है, मैं कुछ तो रीज़न दे दो और मेल करो और देख लो. तो मैंने उस रात अपनी फिल्म का सिनॉप्सिस लिखा, कुछ स्टिल्स पिक्चर्स निकाले, एक रेफरेंस पोस्टर बनाया और मैंने मेल कर दिया. और फॉर्चुनेटली 2 दिन बाद उनका मुझे मेल आया कि ऐसा ऐसा है, तुम भेज दो, और मुझे फीवर दे दिया उन्होंने। बोले वाह क्या बात है। और 1 महीने बाद उनका रिप्लाई भी आ गया। तो मैंने एक्सपेक्ट नहीं किया था कि टोरंटो में होगा। मेरे लिए मामी बहुत बड़ा था फ्रैंकली स्पीकिंग, क्योंकि मैं किसी फिल्म स्कूल से नहीं आता। तो मैंने जो भी फिल्म मेकिंग सीखी है, मैंने मैंने कल भी कहा था कि मैं मामी को लाइक मुंबई फिल्म फेस्टिवल को मेरा फिल्म इंस्टीट्यूट मानता हूँ, क्योंकि मैंने बहुत सारी फिल्में अच्छी बुरी भी दोनों देखी। तो जो भी मेरी लर्निंग है फिल्म की वो यहाँ से हुई है। तो मेरे लिए हुआ कि यार मैं एक दिन हमेशा मैं लाइन में लग के फिल्म देखते थे, मतलब कि एक दिन मेरी फिल्म यहाँ पे होनी चाहिए। तो मेरा वो सपना था कि मामी में हो जाए बहुत है, लेकिन टोरंटो में पहले वर्ल्ड प्रीमियर हो गया, फिर यहाँ पे आए तो इस लाइक। और इसके बाद की अभी हमारा प्लानिंग वही है कि हम फेस्टिवल के साथ और आगे फेस्टिवल से कुछ, अभी नेक्स्ट धर्मशाला है, कायरो इंटरनेशनल था बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली वो पोस्टपोन हो गया, और कुछ है अभी ऑफिशियल नहीं हुआ। तो अभी यही है। और उसके बाद साइमल्टेनियसली वी आर अप्रोचिंग स्टूडियोज, लेट्स सी, क्योंकि छोटी फिल्म है, नॉन एक्टर्स है, फर्स्ट टाइम एक्टर्स है, और कोई बड़ा नाम नहीं है। बट फॉर्चुनेटली मराठी फिल्म इंडस्ट्री इज़ नॉट स्टार ड्रिवन इंडस्ट्री, इज अ कंटेंट ड्रिवन इंडस्ट्री। तो वहाँ पे ऐसा नहीं कि कोई नाम है तो चलेगी। तो देखते हैं, लोगों से बात चल रही है। और लेकिन पहले प्लान है कि थोड़ा हम फिल्म को ट्रैवल करें, लोगों को दिखाएं, थोड़ा बज़ क्रिएट करें, एंड देन।
And Dibakar, I mean, we were talking outside, and you were talking about the kind of form that you use, as you consciously want to use certain kind of form, and you're thinking about reaching out as a particular way. So, what are you thinking? Your first screening has happened in Mami. You're starting your thing. So, what are your thoughts here? So, from here on.
So I was a little. I mean, I wasn't aware. I'm a little bit of an. I mean, I didn't have much knowledge of the entire process. We knew that, we'd make the film and then we'd try and approach, platforms or try and get a distributor. So at the very base of it, I think my whole approach to this is that I do want to sort of encode it in a very approachable, whatever I do is consciously, where my task gets more difficult is to make it almost like a very massy, quote unquote, to use a very generalized word, to make it a very massy, popular film. That is the style of it. And maybe, if there is any messaging or anything that I want to talk about, that gets encoded in that massy form, right? So I wasn't really sure until last year. We shot it, we started editing, and then someone asked me to apply for the Work in Progress Lab, and that's how I basically figured out this whole structure and how this works. And I met a few people, met an agent, met a few programmers, etc., all of that, and that's how the journey started. But even on the way, a lot of people who would watch the film also told me that, this is not a quote unquote festival film. Right, and that was something that I knew would come to me at some point or the other, and that's exactly the kind of point that I want to talk about more. Is that what is that are we doing ourselves a disservice at this point of time by saying ki this is a festival film and this is not a festival film, where I think most of us are in the same boat, at least, where tomorrow we'll all be looking for that same kind of visibility, right? So I think that's the journey, and even going forward, the kind of stuff that I'd want to make would kind of go there, because a lot of the feedback that we're often getting from, say, platforms or what other people are telling us is that this is not commercially viable. It's a good film, it's not commercially viable, and I think that becomes a very difficult. So as opposed to, and your normal answer to that is, oh, so make it worse, make it dumbed down. I think it's the other way, right? I think your task becomes more difficult when you say, ki, okay, I still want to make that film that I want to make, but I want to make it so that those people can't tell me, ki, this not is quote unquote like not. Yeah, exactly. And this whole thing of like some of the feedback I even got earlier on from some people is that, nice film, it's too accessible, which I feel is a very out and out, it's a demeaning term, right? What is the accessibility here that we're talking about, right? And I think that is at the core of the politics of what we can start looking at, right? We can try to look at is that if it is a massy film and if I can make it quote unquote meaningful or something, if I can encode some of my own meaning into it, then making it massy is a challenge, but can also maybe help me tomorrow elevate my craft. So that is always the idea.
So I mean, at least we are happy that we at least broke that one thing. That is not a festival film.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. I can't thank you enough.
And kind of the diversity of the filmmaking styles that on this table, for example. And that's something that's quite exciting for these conversations. Again, thank you, all of you. I mean, this is a great conversation, and good luck with your films. And one of the things that's emerged in these conversations is always about cooperation and supporting each other at some level, right? That's the only way to do this. I mean, there's no other way. I mean, it could be between filmmakers, between artists, between producers and artists, but there's some kind of an ecosystem of paying attention to the other person, which is, I think, other person's work, which is fundamental to this. And I think these kind of occasions have to become that kind of spaces. So, I mean, I'm hoping that all of you are watching each other's films and actually talking about it. And definitely people are. I mean, I think we're getting good responses to your films and so on. So, fantastic. Congratulations. Good luck with your films and its future trajectory and career. Thank you very much. This was a fine conversation.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.